So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Nights of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm starting off my Harry Potter film reviews with my review of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, you can look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever we may be, I can't speak. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course. And please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? My first of many Harry Potter film reviews with my review of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or as it's called in America, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, because it actually has two different names. And you may be sitting there watching or listening to this podcast today and asking the question, why? Why are you now reviewing the Harry Potter film franchise? And that's a good question. And my simple answers are, first of all, I finished reviewing the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit movies, the Middle-earth saga now, so I thought I would review another franchise, because why not? And I'm not really in the mood to review the Star Wars franchise yet. I do think I'll be doing that sometime later this year. And no other franchise was really speaking to me, was really calling me, was really making me think, yes, I should go and check that franchise out and talk about that franchise on this channel, other than the Harry Potter franchise. And the reason the Harry Potter franchise was doing that for me is because I haven't watched these films in such a long while. And I say a long while, I really mean it. A long while. Long with a capital L. I haven't seen these movies in well over a decade, and I barely remembered anything about them. So I thought if I was to watch them and then review them on this channel, it would be like I was, you know, talking about the movie after I'd seen it for the first time. Even though I hadn't seen it for the first time, it may as well be the first time, because before I watched the first Harry Potter movie for the first time in such a long while, the other night on Netflix, I barely remembered anything about these films. I mean, I know about all the iconic stuff, which is, you know, related to Harry Potter, which comes from Harry Potter, like obviously Hogwarts, Quidditch, and all that sort of stuff. But before watching Philosopher's Stone the other night, I remembered small details, like there's a three-headed dog in this franchise at some point. Gary Oldman plays a role. There's a griffin in one of the films. I remember seeing the final film, Deathly Hallows Part 2, if I'm correct there. I remember seeing that in the cinema. It didn't really have a great effect on me because I don't remember much about it. But I remember seeing it in the cinema, and I remember Voldemort's death, and I remember the knights, and other pieces here and there, like the flying car in the second film, and in the first film, I remember there was a chess game, which was, you know, the huge chess game, which Harry, Ron, and Hermione actually get physically involved in, if you follow my thinking. But I barely remembered anything else about these films. I'm sure as I watch them over the next couple of weeks, a lot more will come back to me. But it was the other night like I was watching the first film for the first time, because the opening scene with Dumbledore, you know, taking out all the lights on these lampposts on this tree, I was like, what the hell is this? Is this definitely Harry Potter? Like, I had to pause the film and double check that I was actually watching Philosopher's Stone on Netflix. And I just didn't remember anything about that opening scene. So yeah, it is basically like I'm watching these films for the first time, and I don't really know much about the Harry Potter world either, because I haven't read the Harry Potter books. And yes, I have seen the Fantastic Beasts films, but I haven't watched them loads. I think I think I've seen all those films, the three Fantastic Beasts films, once each, and I think it was each time at the cinema, and they didn't have the greatest effect to me. And I know they have some links to Harry Potter movies, but they're not really the same. Like Dumbledore is in the second two Fantastic Beasts films, and Hogwarts is a location. It is actually a setting in the third Fantastic Beasts movie, but they're not really the same though. And as already mentioned, I haven't read the Harry Potter books, so watching these films now is like a completely new experience. It's like I'm going into a world I am not really familiar with, and that's why I'm talking about them on this channel more than anything, because I want to talk about these films as I basically watch them for the quote-unquote first time, you know? And I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm looking forward to talking about them on this channel as I do so. So, without further ado, let's get into my thoughts on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the first Harry Potter movie, after I watched it for the quote-unquote first time the other night. And honestly, here are my thoughts on this film. I thought it was okay. I think the first Harry Potter movie is okay, and I think it's a fluffy introduction to Hogwarts and the wizarding world. See what I did there? Pun intended for Harry Potter fans. I'm sure you'll understand the pun. For non-Harry Potter fans, the three-headed dog that you see in this film is called Fluffy, and I said this is a fluffy introduction to the world of Harry Potter. See what I did? Ha ha ha! It was a really funny joke. But anyway, yeah, this for me was a fluffy introduction into the world of Harry Potter, and I enjoyed watching it. Well, I enjoyed watching the first 90 minutes of the film, but the second half of the film lost its way in my opinion and became too fluffy, you know. That's not meant to be a pun there, but pun intended anyway. It became too playful, and it didn't sustain my interest and my engagement as much as I hoped it would. Now, before I get into my other thoughts on these films, I should get the elephant in the room out the way. J.K. Rowling, she's obviously caused stirred some controversy over the past couple of years, and I'm not going to give my thoughts on what she said at all. All I'm doing is reviewing these movies in these podcasts. I'm not going to give my opinion on J.K. Rowling at all, other than to say I think she did a good job in creating this world, and I can see the appeal of the world of Harry Potter. I can see why so many people love these books, and I can see why so many people love these films. I know some people, or at least I've watched some videos from some people, who love these movies more than the Lord of the Rings films. I think they're bananas, but it is what it is. It's all subjective, and I love that people love this world, and I can see the appeal, and you know, you've got to credit J.K. Rowling for coming up with this world, regardless of what you think of her. And believe me, I have my thoughts, but I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to get into it in this podcast today. I'm not going to get into it in any of my Harry Potter film reviews at that. But regardless of what you think of her, you cannot deny she's created a world which is so loved, which is loved by so many, and you can see why. You know, I'm so happy that people love the world of Harry Potter the way they do. Personally, I don't, though. I'm yet to love the Harry Potter films and books. I mean, I haven't read any of the Harry Potter books, so, you know, there's that. But I'm yet to love any of the Harry Potter movies, and I'm yet to see why people love them quite the way they do yet. Bear in mind, I've only seen the first film. I've got, you know, 7 other movies to get through yet, but the first film didn't really have a great effect on me. And I'll talk about some of the criticisms I have with this film much later in this review. But first of all, let's talk about many more positives. Let's talk about the positives I found with this film. Let's talk about the things I really liked, the things which stuck out to me and I went, yes, that worked very well. The world building and the world setting, if you follow me, you know, they're setting up all this world, and how Chris Columbus, who directed this film, did a great job at making the film feel real. All these settings, all the magical settings, you know, Diagon Alley, Platform 9 3/4, and Gringotts Bank, Hogwarts itself. It all feels real and it feels lived in. None of these locations feel too fanciful. They don't feel too distant. They feel like you can actually go and explore them yourself, which you can actually do if you go to Harry Potter World at Universal. I've never been there myself. I would love to, even though I'm not a Harry Potter fan, just to explore something like that. And a theme park sounds like a great day out, in my opinion. But you can understand why so many people believe in this world and can see themselves in it. I do think this film did a good job at setting up the world of Harry Potter and making it feel lived in, making it feel real. And I liked all the world building of Platform 9 3/4, Hogwarts, seeing how huge Hogwarts is, Gringotts Bank, and how it slightly delves into the wizarding world, because there is more to the wizarding world, if I'm correct. There's more to the wizarding world than Hogwarts, and I liked how it did that, particularly with the introduction to Diagon Alley, with the John Williams score playing in the background. And that was another thing I really, really liked about this film, the John Williams musical score. I've spoken about John Williams at length on this channel in the past. I love him so much. He's now something like 95 years old, I think, and he is still going. He's still composing movies. Just last year he composed the score to the 5th Indiana Jones film. I think he did a great job in doing so. The score to the latest Indiana Jones film has grown on me so much ever since I first heard it. And he's composed so many iconic musical scores. The scores to all 9 main Star Wars movies, and he composed the main theme to Solo, a Star Wars story, one of the Star Wars movie spin-offs. Also, he did the score to the original Superman, bum, 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 bum. The score to E.T., the score to Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the score to Jaws, the score to the Indiana Jones films, all 5 Indiana Jones movies. The score to, there's another one which I forget off the top of my head right now, Jurassic Park, the first 2 Jurassic Park films. Schindler's List, he did Schindler's List in the same year he did Jurassic Park, 2 of his best scores in my opinion. And he also did the musical scores to the first 3 Harry Potter films. He didn't do the musical score to any of the Harry Potter movies past Prisoner of Azkaban, which I thought was a huge misstep that they let John Williams go from composing these films. I don't know what the other composers did. I don't know how good of a job they did after John Williams left, but John Williams is the GOAT. He's the greatest composer, he's the greatest film composer of all time. Quite simply, he's one of my favourite artists of all time. Right behind the Beatles are my favourite artists of all time. Then it would be John Williams shortly after, because I love all of his music. It's captured my childhood. The Star Wars music was such a big part of my childhood. Same with Indiana Jones music, and same with the music for the first 2 Jurassic Park films, and same with the music for the first 3 Harry Potter movies. Even so, I haven't seen these films in such a long while. I really want to emphasise that. It is like I'm watching this when I watched the film for the first time. Well, when I rewatched the film for the first time in a long while the other night, it was like I was watching it for the first time. Even so, I haven't seen these films in a very long time. I've listened to the music quite a lot because it's John Williams, and I've got all the John Williams soundtracks saved on Spotify on my phone. So I do listen to the music quite a lot because it's brilliant. You can just listen to the score itself. That's something John Williams does so well about all of his scores. You can listen to the score itself and it tells its own story. Even though I hadn't seen Philosopher's Stone in about, 10, 11, 12 years since I watched it the other night, I have been listening to the musical scores quite a lot over the musical score for the first Harry Potter movie quite a lot over the past couple of years. And I don't need to see the film though to appreciate the music, which is something that John Williams does so well in his musical score here. When I was watching it, when I was seeing how the musical score was used, when I was experiencing how the musical score was used in this film, it was really adding to the magic of this film, because I don't actually think this film is that magical. I don't think it's as magical as it wants to be, but the John Williams musical score is making the film more magical. So many moments where the John Williams musical score just swells in the background and takes over the visuals, works so well. Like the one that's coming to mind, 2 big examples actually that are coming to mind right now. The music when you see the train going to Hogwarts and the boom, ba-dum, boom, 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 ba-dum, boom, boom, boom. The way that plays in the background, or the introduction to Diagon Alley. I mispronounced it there. I mispronounced it there, didn't I? Diagon Alley. Did I get it right? I think I got it right. I'm not entirely sure. And apologies if I did get that name wrong. But the way that's introduced with the John Williams musical score, he did such a perfect job composing the musical score to this film. He really, he really did something fantastic. And there's a reason that the Harry Potter theme is so iconic, because it is a brilliantly catchy piece of music that perfectly encapsulates the feel of this film. I may not love this film, but I love the John Williams musical score. Yeah, God. It's perfect. It's another perfect John Williams musical score. Can he do anything wrong? No, he can't. His music is perfection. And yeah, I think he was the best part. I think his music was the best part of the film and added to the magic of the film. Plus, I also enjoyed the performances. I think the kids do a great job, considering this is a big budget production, you know, because this is a film funded by Warner Brothers. And I've seen, and I feel mean saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I've seen child actors in films in the past, big budget movies, where the child acting isn't necessarily the best. And I don't think the child acting is the best here, but it didn't annoy me. The kids didn't annoy me the same way kids have annoyed me with big budget movies in the past, like Goonies. I enjoy Goonies, but the kids are, some of the child acting is slightly annoying in that film, whilst here the child acting works rather well. And Emma Watson, I believed as Hermione Granger, I believed Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter, and I didn't think, oh, what's his name? Is it Rupert? It's something. It's Rupert something. I'm about to say Rupert Everett. That's a completely different actor. It's Rupert something who plays Ron. I forgot the name of him off the top of my head right now. I didn't think he was the best in this film, but I remember his acting got better as the films went on. Like, I remember certain little things I thought about the Harry Potter movies back when I watched them when I was much, much younger. And I remember thinking his acting actually got better as the films went on. I didn't think his acting was particularly good here, but none of the kids annoy me. I thought all the kids did a good job with their performances, especially considering it's a big budget production. But the performances which worked the most for me were Alan Rickman as Snape. As I already mentioned, I haven't read the book, so I don't know what Snape is written like, but it felt like Alan Rickman got that character perfect in his performance. It just felt like he got it right. And as soon as he comes on screen, he eases this, what am I trying to say? He has his dominance. He has his presence every time he's on screen. And it is such a shame that Alan Rickman is no longer with us, because he was such a good actor. You know, look at him as the villain in Die Hard. I look at him as the sheriff of Nottingham in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. He just plays those roles to perfection, and he plays Snape really well in this film. Snape doesn't have a lot of scenes, if I remember correctly. He doesn't have a lot of scenes, but every scene he's in, it feels like he is reading Shakespeare. You know, it feels like he's performing Shakespeare. He throws himself into this role. And I have heard that apparently Alan Rickman didn't actually enjoy doing these films. But regardless, he plays Snape very well. And I got that just from watching the first film. I can't wait to see more of him going forward, because I remember certain scenes with him in the later movies. Like, isn't there a twist with him in one of the later films? I don't remember what the twist is, but there's something with him in one of the later movies. Also, though, even though Alan Rickman was my favourite performance in the film, Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid was a close second. Again, an actor who's no longer with us. But I remember, I haven't seen the Harry Potter reunion that happened on HBO Max and is available on Now TV in the UK. I haven't seen it. That came out a couple of years ago. I haven't seen it, but I've seen clips from it. And there's a clip from Robbie Coltrane from the reunion saying, I'm not going to be here in a couple of years' time, but the character of Hagrid is through these films. And that was such a emotional video to watch. But his performance as Hagrid, you know, it's perfect. And every time he's on screen, you're smiling because of Robbie Coltrane's performance. Yeah, he really is. He was a joy to watch. It was an absolute joy to watch. And I think they were my favourite performances in the film. I loved Richard Harris as Dumbledore as well. I know they changed the Dumbledore actor, but I thought he played him very well. And I didn't realise John Hurt was in this film. You know, he plays a person that gives Harry Potter his wand. He isn't in the film that much, it's more of a cameo role than anything. But I was watching it, like, oh, John Hurt. Didn't know he was in this film at all. So yeah, I loved seeing him. And then John Cleese is one of the ghosts in Hogwarts. I didn't realise he was in this film. So yeah, I thought a lot of the performances worked really well. You know, what's her name as Professor McGonagall? What is her name? Maggie... something... Oh, completely forgetting off the top of my head right now. Ian McKellen does a great impression of it. Anyway, yeah, I thought all the supporting performances worked very well, but my favourite two supporting performances were Alan Rickman as Snape and Robbie Coltrane as Hagrid, and I didn't realise that John Hurt was in this film either. And I really liked the production design, the set design, all of it looked great, and it's a very well produced film. You can see how much money has been put into this film, and it does a good job at creating this world and making it feel as real as possible. Like when we got into Diagon Alley, as I already mentioned, it looked real. I believed in it. And, you know, I can't tell about many other fantasy movies. That all being said, I do think this is an entertaining film. I enjoyed the first hour and I liked all the Quidditch stuff and the chess game. But even though I liked that stuff, I do think the film slightly loses its way in its second half, or when it gets to the later stages and Harry, Ron and Hermione are trying to find out who this evil sorcerer is who is in Hogwarts and is trying to change things. He's trying to do bad things. The film started to lose its way for me because it felt a little too playful. I don't think it quite had the same stakes. I don't think it quite had the stakes that it was pretending it had. Because the film, at times, it felt like it was trying to say to me, if these main characters don't succeed, the fate of Hogwarts is over. You know, Hogwarts will be gone forever. But I know that's not the case, and I knew none of the main characters died. I knew Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't die. So I was watching this, and they're getting into all this peril, and I'm like, well, I don't care too much, though, because I know you're still alive throughout the rest of the 7 movies. So yeah, I didn't care about the late stage of the film too much, and I didn't feel the stakes were particularly high, and I felt it's still a little playful. At times it felt like a video game, you know, in the later stages when they're trying to find out who that evil sorcerer is, who's the person behind all the mishappenings in Hogwarts. You know, it felt like a video game where in order to find out who the big bad guy is, and also in order to face off the big bad villain, Harry, you must play as Harry, Ron and Hermione and go through this room and do this thing and play in this chess game and then defeat the big bad guy. It felt like I was almost playing through a video game, but I wasn't playing through a video game. I was watching someone else play through a video game. It felt a little too playful for my liking. And some of the CGI too didn't work, didn't look particularly great. I know this film was made in 2001, but if I'm going to compare to another fantasy film, which was made in 2001, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, a far better film in my opinion, that film has mostly, I'm not going to say all the CGI in that film is held up perfectly, but about 90% of the CGI in Fellowship of the Ring still looks brilliant today. And that film was made in the same year this film was. And yet there were certain moments in Philosopher's Stone, in this Harry Potter movie, where the CGI did look a little dated. And particularly during the Quidditch game sequences, it looked like the human characters were human characters out of, say, Polar Express or Beowulf, which you don't really want in a film like this. You know, I don't mind Polar Express. I don't mind the look of the characters, of the human, sort of alien-looking characters in that film. I don't mind it, like some other people do. But I'm not watching Harry Potter expecting the same sort of visual effects as Polar Express, yet it felt like that in some of the Quidditch game sequences. I didn't think the CGI had held it well, especially with the three-headed dog. I liked the whole idea of the three-headed dog, but the CGI in it didn't look like it aged well, And if I was to compare to Fellowship of the Ring a bit more, I think Fellowship of the Ring does a better job at introducing its audience, and this is just me. Other people might have other opinions, and that's the beauty of the subjectivity of film. But I think the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, did a far superior job at getting its audience invested and immersed into this fantastical world. The way Fellowship of the Ring shows all these different places in Middle Earth and shows the dichotomy of all these places and does all this world building in one film. Now the film is 3 hours, and if you watch the extended edition it's almost 4 hours, but at the same time though you get invested into all the characters in Fellowship of the Ring just like that as soon as you meet them, and you get immersed into the world in the prologue, in the opening seconds of that film. And I didn't feel that the first Harry Potter movie did that though. I felt that some of the fantastical elements in the film weren't as immersive and weren't as engrossing as they could have been. And I think that was also because Harry Potter is contemporary fantasy, it's low fantasy, whereas Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring is high fantasy. It's a completely fantastical world that we're in there. Middle Earth, although it may look like it has some similarities to the real world we live in, it is a completely fantastical world though. And so when I'm watching Lord of the Rings films, I can immerse myself into that world just like that. I'm not thinking about the real world too much because I'm not seeing similarities, if you follow my thinking. Whilst with this film, the first 20 minutes to half an hour is taking place in the real world. It's taking place on this suburban street in, I don't know if suburban's the right word actually, but it's taking place on this normal street in the UK. And you follow the Dudleys, you're at the Dudleys' home where Harry Potter is living. And then when it went to the fantastical stuff though, when it went into this fantasy world later on, into the wizarding world, I didn't believe it too much because the real world stuff felt more real than the fantasy stuff felt more fantasy. If you follow my thing, I'm not sure how much I'm making sense, but I felt the fancy stuff, although it did a good job at feeling real enough and having this verisimilitude with it, it felt the fancy elements of the film, like Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, Gringotts and all that stuff felt lived in and it felt real enough. It didn't feel quite as immersive and quite as eye-opening and quite as engrossing as the fantasy elements in the first Lord of the Rings film. And some may say that's an unfair comparison, and I understand why, but also I am comparing both movies. I am comparing Fellowship of the Ring to The Philosopher's Stone because they both came out in the same year. Fellowship of the Ring came out in 2001 and Philosopher's Stone came out in 2001. And when you see one film, at least for me, do the whole fantasy immersion so much better than another movie, I couldn't help but compare. I'm also comparing because it wasn't that long ago since I rewatched Fellowship of the Ring, so it was, there's so many aspects of Fellowship of the Ring, even so I haven't seen the film for a good couple of months or so, there's so many aspects, there's so many aspects of it which are still ingrained in my mind, so much imagery from that film which is still there in my mind and I can't get it out and I don't want to get it out, whilst Philosopher's Stone didn't have that for me. I didn't think it was the best introduction because it didn't throw you into the world. The filmmaking and the storytelling wasn't as well done as Fellowship of the Ring, and it didn't make me go, whoa, this world is something I want to see more of and I want to see all the different aspects of this world. it made me go, yeah, I can see the appeal, but I don't totally get it myself. Also, the film is directed by Chris Columbus, and Chris Columbus has directed such other famous films as Home Alone 1 and 2. He also directed Mrs. Doubtfire, and he founded America. Just joking, that's Christopher Columbus. Chris Columbus is a completely different person. I mean, his name might also be Christopher Columbus, but he's known as Chris Columbus as a director. And I don't think Chris Columbus is a particularly great director. He's known, as I mentioned, for directing the first 2 Home Alone films, Mrs. Doubtfire, and the first 2 Harry Potter movies. And I don't think he did the best job at capturing a child's imagination, at capturing the joy of the childlike wonder of this world, which I felt like he was trying to do. I think he did a fine job. I'm not going to say he did a bad job, because I don't think he did a bad job, but I think he did a fine job. Yet at the same time, I couldn't help but compare to Spielberg in my mind, and how Spielberg captured the exploration of a child's imagination, the childlike wonder, and a child's dream through the medium of film in such movies as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Hook, or The Goonies. Now, Spielberg didn't direct The Goonies, but he did write the story for it, and he produced it, and he was on set of that film quite a lot. And some people might say comparing Chris Columbus as a director to Spielberg isn't perhaps a fair comparison. I understand that thinking, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I was watching this film thinking, Spielberg captures that childlike wonder so much better in E.T. and Hook, films which he did direct, and the joy of being a child in a world like this, where all these things are happening. I think Spielberg does that so much better, particularly in E.T. And I also think Spielberg does it so much better because he adds these dark elements into these films. Like Hook. Let's look at that film for a sec. Hook I reviewed on this channel quite a few years back, and I was far mean on... I was too mean on that film. I was too mean in my review of that film, because I've since rewatched it, I thought about that film quite a lot. I didn't give Hook enough credit than I should have. I want to go back and re-review it on this channel at some point this year, because it is a far better film than I gave it credit for. It captures the joy of a child's imagination, and it has this energy in it, and you can see why that is a proper family film. And it's also a family film. It's also a great family film because it has some dark elements to it. It has some quite dark parts to it, like when Peter Banning, played by Robin Williams in that film, and his wife come back from the theatre, if I remember correctly, early on that film, and they realise that their children have been kidnapped by Hook and his crew, by Captain Hook and his crew. The scene where they realise that, it's actually quite dark, and it's quite intense, it's quite suspense building. And although there's not many moments like that in Hook, although Hook is one of Spielberg's more playful films, it still has more dark elements than this film did. At least it felt like it had more dark elements. This film does have some dark elements, it does, but it didn't feel dark enough. It didn't make me go, Christ, I can understand why a kid would actually find this quite uneasy to watch. Whilst some moments in Hook did feel like that. Although if you want to use a better example, the whole scientist storyline in E.T. is really dark when you think about it. They want to experiment on Elliot and E.T. and the way that storyline is done is, God, it's brilliant. And it does have this tension. I still watch that now, and I'm still quite shook up by parts of the scientist storyline in E.T. But I wasn't really shook up by anything in this film. And again, sure, I'm not totally the target audience. This is a family film. I understand that this film is primarily targeting its audience at a younger audience. Not sure if that made sense there, but hopefully you understand what I mean. But as already kind of alluded to there, the best family films should have some dark elements to them. And I don't think this film did. I don't think this film really did the best with the dark elements, and I don't think it really did that great of a job as it could have done at encapsulating the childlike wonder of being at Hogwarts and being in a world, in a fantastical world at that, where all these unearthly and unworldly things are happening, yet other films like E.T. and Hook do that better, in my opinion. And Goonies. Goonies is not a film I love, but I do enjoy, and I think that film, although Spielberg didn't direct it, Richard Donner directed it, in fact, who also directed Superman and Scrooged. I think he did a far better job. I think it was Richard Donner, actually. I think he did a far better job at, again, encapsulate the childlike wonder, being on this adventure and doing all these things. But I don't think Chris Columbus did that the best. And actually, I think Chris Columbus did a better job directing the first 2 Home Alone films than this film. Which I didn't think I'd say before I rewatched this film the other night. I think he did a better job then. And again, it's probably not a fair comparison comparing Chris Columbus, a director who hasn't made many, brilliant films, to Spielberg, who is arguably the best filmmaker of all time. But I couldn't help but make those comparisons in my mind when I was watching this film. Particularly because Spielberg actually said himself that he would never make a Harry Potter movie because it would be too easy. And I was thinking, I don't know what that really means. I'm not going to comment on that, but it did also make me think, what would a Harry Potter film directed by Spielberg look like? We'll never see. We'll never see. But it did make me think that, and it made me think, if Spielberg directed this film, it could have had that same feel of E.T., Goonies, or Hook, but in a wizarding world. And I would have preferred that to what we actually got. So those were the reasons the film didn't totally work for me. I didn't think Chris Columbus did a great job at capturing the childlike wonder of what was taking place and the dark elements too well. I felt the film was a little too playful in its later stages when it felt a bit like a video game. You have to go through this door, you have to get through you have to get past the 3-headed dog and do the chess game, and then you can face off the big bad villain. It felt like a video game, and I didn't find the stakes to be too high, and it didn't quite immerse me and engage me as much as I wanted it to. As much as other first films in franchises, such as Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, has. I liked the film. I enjoyed watching it. But it's nothing special, in my opinion. And, I might have the same reaction to this as I've had to Hook over the past couple of years. It might be one of those films that the more I think about, the more I want to go back and revisit and actually go, yeah, this is a bit of a comfort movie for me. I can see everything I have wrong with it, but I can still watch it and smile and, enjoy the ride that these characters are going on. But as of now, I don't know if I'm going to have that reaction, because the more I think about Hook, the more I actually enjoy it for what it is. The more I think about this film, the more I think about how the second part of the film just really didn't work for me. And when they're trying to unravel this mystery, it's like, why should I care? Why should I care about what's going on? Because it's clearly not that important, or it's clearly not that important right now, And then I know it links to Voldemort, but I didn't really get how. Also, I didn't really understand, and this is the last thing I'll say, I didn't really understand the rules of the chess game later on. Because it's meant to be like wizard chess or something. Again, I didn't really understand it. And I didn't really understand it because the rules of the game weren't made clear to me. If I remember correctly, there was something with one playing the game in the Hogwarts Hall early on in the film. But then they didn't really explain the rules of wizard chess. And from someone like me, who hasn't I was about to say played the book, who hasn't read the book that this film is based on, I didn't understand what was going to happen to Ron if this chess piece moved at this bit during the chess game. The chess game is a cool idea, and I liked what, they were trying to do there. But all I was thinking during the chess game sequence is, why don't you just walk around the chessboard? Because if you actually look at the scenes there is this space on the side of the chessboard that the main character could just walk around, and all I was thinking was, walk around the chessboard and you'd be done with this scene so much quicker. But, that's just me. I liked the chess game scene. It's probably my favourite scene in the later stages of the film. But it didn't, also, name me question, just walk around the chessboard. Walk around the chessboard. What are the rules of this game? You haven't really told me. At least, if they did tell me, it wasn't too memorable. You know? And I think this film wasn't too memorable for me overall. Again, there's a lot to like. I like the production design, the John Williams musical score, perfection, and the performances were all really great. And from what I've heard, they keep the same actors, which is even greater. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of these films, though. I will say that, even though I didn't love this film, it did make me want to see more, though, which is another big plus. But I felt this film was a little too playful and wasn't a great introduction into the wizarding world and the world of Harry Potter. Particularly for someone like me who hasn't read the book. Yeah, it was a fluffy introduction as I've titled this podcast today. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, I'm going to say it's a 6.5 out of 10. I give films a 6 out of 10 or above if I just enjoyed them, and I'm giving this film a 6.5 out of 10. The 0.5 makes all the difference. I'm giving this film a 6.5 out of 10 because of the musical score, which did so much heavy lifting for me. It did so much for me with this film. Honestly, if it was composed by any other composer, I might say this film was... You probably would have got a rant out of me with this movie if I'm being completely frank, as I should be in all my reviews, because otherwise, what's the point of me doing these film reviews? But yeah, you know, the musical score did do a lot of heavy lifting, but the musical score is there, though. You know, it's a vital part of the film, and the best part of the film, in my opinion, as well. Still, I love the performances, and you know, there is a lot to like. It's a well-produced film. I thought it was going to be a film that was right up my alley, and for the first 90 minutes I was thinking, you know what, this is wonderful, but then it completely lost me. Well, it didn't completely lose me, but it pretty much completely lost me. Anyway, I mean, rambling on about the film way too much, but you get the point. I didn't think it was as good as it could have been, and I felt it missed the mark in some places, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of these films, though, which I didn't really expect to say before I started this podcast, but I've just, you know, I've just come up with this, I haven't even written that in my notes, I've just come up with, as I'm recording the podcast, and I liked the world of this film. I liked how it set up for what was to come, even if I think it could have been done better. I think in the end it really comes down to this. I didn't watch this film. I don't understand why people love Harry Potter so much, and I hoped that I would. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for me is a 6.5 out of 10. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. Let me know your thoughts on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in the comment section below. Maybe you love the film, and if you do, that's great. I don't want to take that away from you whatsoever. And if you do love the film, please let me know why in the comment section below. Let me know why I'm wrong. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the first Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone as you might know it, in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.